Dan Bilzerian made tens of millions of dollars playing poker and now lives a life of insane luxury. Let's see how this controversial personality made all of it happen. How it all began. Dan Brandon Bilzerian was born on the 7th of December 1980 in Tampa, Florida. He was born to a wealthy family, but a very controversial one at that. His father, Paul, was something close to the Wolf of Wall Street, a real estate investor, businessman, and corporate takeover specialist. Dan's father was reported to have made over $400 million in certain years in business. He had set up a massive trust fund for his two sons, Dan and Adam, to ensure their future would be secure no matter what. It was later found out that Paul did not exactly make his money in the way that he should have, and in 1989 would be indicted for tax and security fraud, providing false information to the SEC, and conspiracy. And after paying a fine of $1.5 million, had his prison sentence cut down. He insisted his conviction was wrong in the first place, and Dan had to spend a few months without his father. 2 years after he was released from prison, he then filed for bankruptcy, a peculiar move considering that he was worth over $62 million not long before. It became obvious he had stashed most of the money in the trust fund that he set up for his son. The case would set the tone for Dan's traumatic childhood and his future. He revealed in interviews that he was bullied in school, and at one point had lost interest, becoming a menace, and then was kicked out. He managed to make it to high school in Florida and was once again kicked out his senior year for rebellious behavior. He would be arrested for possession of weapons and even spent a bit of time in jail for illegal possession. Not knowing what to do with his life, he then enrolled in the Navy SEAL training program in 1999 at the age of 18. After spending 500 days in the most extreme training, he was seriously injured on both of his knees and later on would be dropped from the program for violating safety protocols during training exercise.
Every gambler has that one story, the time they beat the odds and hit it big. Now it's your turn to create your story and become a main character in our future videos. Welcome to Crypto Rush, where luck meets opportunity in the world of crypto gambling. Deposit crypto, play your favorite games, and cash out in seconds. Crypto Rush brings the joy and excitement of a casino to your fingertips. Click the first link in the description and start your winning streak today. Use code CR50 to get $50 free to play on slots, casino games, or the sportsbook. Crypto Rush, where legends are made.
College and poker. Following his departure from the military, Dan had acquired a certain level of discipline and resilience, so he decided to try his luck one more time at education. He enrolled at the University of Florida, where he studied business and criminology, but there was also something else he discovered that would change his life forever, and that was the game of poker. He began to indulge more frequently in the game, learning from the best in the business, and would often initiate small stakes with his friend. And conveniently, his older brother Adam happened to be a professional poker player at the time. It was like the stars had aligned in his favor, guiding him on a path he would finally take. Dan received $6,000 from his discharge in the Navy, so he had loose funds to roll with and often played with his brother and friends, competing in small games. Over time, he began playing online, but was not very good, especially on a wider platform, and lost all of his money. According to an interview, he sold 3 of his guns to get more money for gambling, and it was pretty normal for the average poker player, as quitting was not exactly an option. According to Dan, after selling his guns for $750, within a matter of a week he had turned that into $10,000. He then proceeded on to Vegas, where he played for about 3 weeks, getting his bankroll up to $187,000. The story seems quaint, but that was where the backlash began for the so-called professional poker player. Boy, did it come in droves. Money and fame. Dan Bilzerian's apparent poker skills were ridiculed by many online who felt that he didn't have what it took to make genuine money from online poker. It was a place for only the toughest and most rugged players in the world. Dan did have an aggressive form of play. He had been seen to excel in light offline games, but nobody could testify to his online ability. Many of his claims of success were on high-stakes private games with extremely wealthy opponents, businessmen, or even celebrities. And on Larry King Live, he said that he had beaten a wealthy opponent in high-stakes poker, winning up to $54 million, an amount which just didn't make any sense. It was either the opponent was a reckless billionaire who didn't have any skill, or the story could have been a little fruity. World Series of Poker. The World Series of Poker is one of the only competitions where professional players can brag about either winning or participating. It gave a form of credibility to being an actual full-time gambler, and Dan took well advantage of it, telling the story of his experience with every opportunity that he got. In 2009, he made his first and only appearance in a tournament at the World Series of Poker, and would often go on to say that he had played with the greats and gotten the opportunity to even best some of them. But the fact of the matter was, he finished 180th, which earned him a measly $36,626. While it wasn't an extraordinary feat, it was enough to solidify his reputation as a skilled poker player, at least for competing at the highest level and surviving a few rounds. Gambling stories and skepticism. Dan's whole gambling career, as narrated by him, has faced significant scrutiny, from winning $50 million in a single year to other outrageous gambling exploits. Many have questioned his statements, pointing out a lack of records to show that he indeed had won any tournaments. There wasn't any shred of public data to support any of his claims, and most people believe that his money had come from the family fortune or private investments, but Dan consistently dismissed the allegation. As debates would continue about the source of his wealth, he needed to churn out a lot more stories to satisfy the growing skepticism and curiosity. This would lead to him coining anecdotes about how he had earned bits of his wealth. One of the most notable stories involved a private game with a millionaire where he had bet $2.5 million on a single hand. And the crazy part is that he won. He also spoke on flying to exclusive destinations on private jets to play high-stakes games, often wagering ridiculous amounts that would throw the most seasoned players off of their game. He talked about billionaires who had offered up large amounts and lost, but never mentioned names. No one has ever come out to confirm losing anything to him. This would make his tales even more tall. Established poker players like Daniel Negreanu and Doug Polk have questioned the legitimacy of his high-stake wins and poker career, and since Dan would probably never play publicly, it's difficult to tell how good of a player he may have become or if he truly has what it takes to play with the big leagues. Trust fund controversy. As great as things had been for Dan, his life really took off in 2010 when he began to display a ton of escapades and playboy lifestyle on social media. He started showing off his fortune and garnered a lot of followers as well as critics. There was also something that nobody knew about Dan, something that had been at the back of the burner and only emerged in 2010. Remember the trust fund that his father had left for him and his brother? That became accessible in 2010, the very same year that he turned 30 years old. He claimed that he didn't need the trust fund and he was doing pretty well before the money even arrived, and according to interviews, he had taken just a little bit of money and gave out the remaining that was left over. In a different interview, he claimed he gave the rest of the money to his brother and refused to discuss just how much he had gotten from the trust, what the money helped him to accomplish. His love life took a hit as he broke up with his playboy girlfriend in 2011. However, it was also a blessing in disguise. He now had the freedom to do whatever he wanted. Freshly single with newly acquired millions in a trust fund, it's no small wonder he began living large in 2011, never hesitated to let the whole world know on Instagram. His uploads started with him posting pictures with his brother and other simple activities that evolved into beautiful ladies, fancy cars, and private jets. And as you may have guessed, piqued the interest of a whole lot of people, wanted to know more about his source of wealth, and many were invested in his story and why he felt the need to show it off so much. Was he using his lifestyle as some form of leverage to scam others, or was it actually genuine? Only 2 years after joining Instagram, he hit 1.3 million followers, and a year later, he had well over 7 million. By 2018, he had hit 24 million followers and embraced a new persona, King of Instagram, while showcasing his opulence. The downfall. Having amassed a huge following on social media, Dan began his own brand in September of 2018 called Ignite. He sold accessories, beverages, and smoking products, and everything seemed to be going smooth for the millionaire except for one problem: authenticity and truth. The issue was that nobody knew the actual source of his wealth or could testify to the legitimacy of his fortune, and to make matters even worse, his father had an unpleasant history with the law that went sour and led to prison time and missing money. This would prompt potential investors to stay away from Dan's business. He kept selling the story of winning his fortune through poker, but it sort of made things worse because it seemed like investor money may accompany him to Las Vegas on his next trip. But things became even more uncomfortable when in September of 2020, an article was released stating that Dan's father Paul was secretly running Ignite from the background. This lit a match on an already flammable situation, and Dan claimed to have very little to no connection to his father, but this was absurd as he had been found to have ties to the company. Ever since the information was made public, the stock price per share of the company had greatly plummeted. Dan announced a yearly loss of $50 million, and many speculated the company would be shut down within weeks at that rate. What do you think of the fortune of Dan Bilzerian? Did he make his money off of playing poker, or is it simply hidden money from his father or a trust fund? Let me know in the comments below, and also make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you never miss another great video like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.